Joining us now from Paris is Mr. Maher Nicholas Ferzli, Director of the EU-ASEAN Center, for his analysis of what these renewed sanctions mean for Iran, the region, and the future of diplomacy. Mr. Ferzli, welcome to Qnews. Now, how do you read Iran's reaction to this sweeping return of UN sanctions?
I'm delighted to join you, Hala, today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
It's very complicated, and I hate to sound cynical, but I'll do it anyway. So both the Iranian regime and the so-called European Troika, who are, the hardliners in that theatrical power play, they're both lying. So they're both lying to the enemy, and they're both lying to their own public opinion. So from that perspective, Macron is not very different from the mullahs in Tehran. Why am I saying so? Because in reality, they both have ulterior motives. What do I mean here? Is like, now America's interest in the Middle East and Asia and the rest of the world are very different from the European Troika's interest. Who is the European Troika? It's basically three states.
Germany, France, and the UK.
Exactly, the governments, not the people, right?
Yes.
And what do we have in Germany, France, and the UK today? We have an economic slowdown. Some experts say an economic collapse. And so when the government, is facing a social, economic crisis, that government, be he democratic or undemocratic, the governments are usually try to find adventures far away to, to lure the public opinion. So what I'm saying here is that these governments in Germany, France, and to a lesser extent Britain, they are neoconservatives. What does it mean? So they follow the George Bush, Dick Cheney, Tony Blair worldview. They are very pro-NATO. And in that sort of pro-NATO, George Bush, Tony Blair worldview, the Middle East, Saddam Hussein, Khomeini, whatever, Iran, they are evil. And they present themselves as, the white knights, fighting for peace and justice in the Middle East. Of course, it's all propaganda. But here, something very different is happening in America, because unlike Obama, when Obama struck the nuclear Iran deal 10 years ago, Troika and the Americans were united. They were the same, group of people. And the terms of the Iran nuclear deal 10 years ago were actually quite good for the Iranians. And what have the Iranians done in the past 10 years? Where they have spoiled that huge opportunity. So what they got 10 years ago from Obama and the Europeans, they got tens of billions of dollars, of euros and dollars, which were frozen since the year 1979. They got all the cash back. They got 10 years without sanctions. And what did they do during 10 years? They did nothing. So they really squandered that great opportunity, which they could have used to build the Iranian economy. And they sent billions to Hizb al-Dawah in Baghdad, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen. They played, power politics. They neglected their own national economy. And here they are 10 years later, and they realize that they have lost 10 years. So the Iranians are also to blame for what's happening to them. So clearly, it's true that the European Troika is aggressive. It's true that the European Troika is not sincere, blah, 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 yes. But at the same time, the Iranians, some of the blame has to be laid at their door.
Yes. So speaking economically, since you brought this up, Mr. Nicholas, now the rial has collapsed to a record low. How serious will the economic pain be for ordinary Iranians? They've been complaining, and they said that things are not the same than 2 years ago, for example.
It is bad. It is bad. The only small saving grace that is preventing the situation to collapse even further is that the price of oil has kind of stabilized. Not at a high enough level, but it has stabilized at an average mediocre level, which is giving a little bit of oxygen to the economy of Iran. Not enough.
Not enough, but at least, keeping it alive still.
The one saving grace for Iran long term, which is that America under Trump does not view them as enemies, unlike the French, the German, the British, and the Israelis. Trump is indifferent to Iran. So he doesn't care about the Arabian Gulf or the Persian Gulf or Iran. Why is he indifferent? Because Trump and his people, they want to focus aggressively on one issue only, which is the geo-economic technological race with China. They're obsessed with that. They consider there's only one important issue in the world today for America. It is the technological financial race with Beijing. And look at the map. Look at the map. Iran is a big Central Asian country at the heart of China's New Silk Road. So considering that America views China's New Silk Road as a threat, the Iranians here, they have some leverage, because what the Trump White House doesn't want to do, they don't want to antagonize Iran too much, because they don't want Iran and Russia to go into the arms of China. So they want, unlike the Europeans, who are really not very smart, Trump is quite smart, and he understands, as a cold Machiavellian global player, that if you pressure Russia and Iran too aggressively, what's going to happen? They're going to be pushed into the arms of the Chinese. And Trump, what he wants is Russia and Iran to be neutral, not to go with Beijing against Washington. And I think it's quite smart from the part of Trump. But of course, the Israelis and the neoconservatives, the war
will push exactly in the opposite direction.
Exactly.
Right? Yes.
The warmongering neoconservatives in Paris and Berlin and Jerusalem, they want the opposite. They don't want what Trump wants. And this is why the 12 days war between Israel and Iran was very bizarre. And the way the 12 days war ended was very strange, because Trump pressured both Israel and Iran aggressively. And he clearly showed that America does not want to be dragged into a war in the Gulf. Of course, the French and the Israelis, they would like to see America dragged into a war in the Gulf. And, just quickly, I'm aware of time, why was Trump elected? One of the main reasons why Trump was elected is clearly public opinion in America realized after several years that the whole Iraq, Saddam Hussein, Gulf War
was a lie.
That was a big lie, and that they were lied to. They were taken into a war. They were entangled into a horrible war in Samarra, Tikrit.
Yeah, and they don't want to go through this again. Definitely, there is more awareness.
And they are now vaccinated.
They don't want to be lied on again.
Exactly. So I think this is the big difference between Washington and Europe.
So do you think that these sanctions can actually deter Iran from pursuing its nuclear program, or will they only harden its position? Because apparently Iran is determined to proceed with its nuclear program despite the sanctions.
Yeah, like I said, I think they're both to blame. The Iranians are to blame in part, and the Israelis and the Europeans are also to blame. What I think here, the whole thing is theatrical, because the issue is not the Iran nuclear deal, and the real issue is not even sanctions. I think there's a deeper issue here, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency. I think this is the problem.
IAEA.
This is because, let's remember the 12 days war between Israel and Iran was started by Israel. And what did they do? What did Benjamin Netanyahu do? Using it as a pretext to start bombarding the Iranians, he opened on his desk theatrically the latest quarterly or monthly report from the International Atomic Energy. He said, oh, look, this is the latest, IAEA report dated June or May 2025. There's a paragraph in the report which is critical of the Iranians. Therefore, I'm going to bombard the Iranians, right? So here, there is a problem. And what is the problem is, the International Atomic Energy Agency is not a neutral body, even though they describe
Although
themselves.
It should be.
It should be. And it's not a very transparent body. Why? If you look at the highest...
Although it should be as well.
Should, yeah. The highest echelons of the International Atomic Energy Agency, who are the directors? Well, 90% of the senior directors, they're all French, British, German, and Italian. So they don't represent the whole world, right? You don't have any Egyptian or Malaysian or Sudanese experts. 80 or 90% of the senior experts are from Western Europe. So there is an imbalance. It is not a neutral democratic body. And I think it's dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Because we need an international atomic energy agency which has credibility. And the only way they can restore their own credibility is by being absolutely neutral. If they are perceived as being favorable to Netanyahu or Macron, which they are, they will lose their credibility, and then that will give a pretext to the Iranians, and the mullahs in Tehran will say, oh, look, there's a dirty trick here. The agency is in cahoots with the Likud party. Therefore, we stop cooperating with the agency. So I think it's a vicious circle here. We need to break that vicious circle, restore credibility, and they need to hire. There are many, nuclear physics experts in Cairo, in Riyadh, in Indonesia, in China. They should hire more of them.
Well, the EU also stresses that diplomacy must continue. From your own perspective, does Europe still have enough leverage to broker a new deal, or you think it has its own biased approach, if I may say?
I think they don't want a new deal because, when you want sincerely a new deal, you follow a middle-of-the-road solution, right? The via media, Aristotle, the famous Aristotelian الطريق الوسطي, via media, right? What the European diplomats have done at the UN in the past 3 weeks is very different from that middle-of-the-road compromise solution because, if you want the Iranians to make concessions, you have to bring them to the middle of the road. And the Europeans have not done that. What have they done in the past 2 weeks? They have offered the Iranians a short time frame. They have told them, okay, you guys have 2 weeks to make 50 concessions. If you really want to compromise, you don't tell the other side, you have 12 days to make 200 concessions, because if you say so, that will ensure that there will be no compromise. So even though the Iranians are partly to blame, let's be honest, the Europeans never played a truly honest diplomatic game, and they never gave them space to come to the table and reach a fair middle-of-the-road compromise. What does it tell us? It tells us the European Troika does not want to compromise.
Yes.
What they want escalation, and that escalation is very dangerous.
Well, Mr. Maher Nicholas Ferzli, thank you so much for your insight and sharp analysis.